Alright, so it's Parshas Lech Lecha. Parshas Lech Lecha. So this is the first time we're introduced to Avraham Avinu, really. Or Avraham Avinu starts his mission. Starts bringing the Jewish people to the forefront. Pasuk says in Parshas Bereishis, Pasuk says after the story of creation, the Pasuk says, Eila tol l'shamayim v'aretz. This was the story, this is the story of creation. V'hi baram. Simply translated, when Hashem created it, when Hashem performed the act of creation, this is the story. Chazal said that the word V'hi baram, the same letters as Be'avraham. Meaning, Eila tol l'shamayim v'aretz, this is the story of creation, Be'avraham. Somehow the world was created in the schus of Avraham Avinu, because of Avraham Avinu. So the question is, we have to understand why is it? What was so special about Avraham Avinu that, particularly the way he served Hashem, in that merit, Hashem created the world? What exactly is the connection between Avraham Avinu and the creation of the world? That's number one. Number two. At the end of this week's parsha, there's a very mysterious episode called the Bris Bein HaBesarim. What was the Bris Bein HaBesarim? After the whole episode of Avraham Avinu fighting the four kings, saving Lot and all that, Hashem comes with a prophecy and says to Avraham Avinu, Eretz Yisrael is going to be yours. Eretz Yisrael is going to be yours, be your descendants. Eretz Yisrael is going to be the Jewish people. So Avraham Avinu says to Hashem, B'meh Eida ki Arishan. How do I know that I'm going to inherit it? How do I know that I'm going to get Eretz Yisrael? Chazal explained that Avraham Avinu's question was, in what schus, what mitzvahs are my children going to perform that they're going to deserve this eternal bond with Eretz Yisrael? So Hashem responds, Kachli Egel Mushalesh, as the pasuk says that Hashem responded to him, takes a bunch of animals, different types of animals, a cow, a few cows, some goats, sheep, and things like that, and cut them up in a specific way, and I will pass through, my divine presence will pass through the pieces, and that somehow is going to show you this bond between the Jewish people and Eretz Yisrael. Chazal explained the following thing in the Medrash. Listen to this. Medrash says that these animals that Hashem told Avraham Avinu to gather together and to cut represented the concept, the mitzvah of sacrifices, the mitzvah of karbanos. Says the Medrash, here are like gimel minei parim. Hashem said to take 3 different calves, the gimel minei seirim, 3 different goats, the gimel minei elam, and 3 different sheep. So Chazal explained, gimel minei parim, that the cows that Avraham Avinu was told to bring are corresponding to par Yom Kippurim. One is corresponding to a special sacrifice brought Yom Kippur, par bal kol mitzvahs, another sacrifice brought when the Jewish people do certain averos. Every single sacrifice, every single animal that Avraham Avinu was told to bring corresponds to a specific sacrifice the Jewish people would eventually bring. Meaning to say, Hashem is telling Avraham Avinu, you asked the question, in what schus is the Jewish people going to inherit Eretz Yisrael? The answer is sacrifices. But Chazal make the following point, that there's one type of sacrifice which is left out. The type of sacrifice which was left out, that Hashem did not tell Avraham Avinu to bring, was a sacrifice of flour. We know that most sacrifices brought in the Beis HaMikdash are of animals, different types of animals, cows, sheep, goats, and things like that. But there's another type of sacrifice that is brought in the Beis HaMikdash, that's a mincha. A mincha is a flour offering. Chazal say that that's left out. Avraham Avinu was not told to put flour on the floor. Chazal say, Rishon Bar Yochai said, Kol hakaparis hiruloi, that all sacrifices were revealed to Avraham Avinu at that time. But the concept of a carbon mincha was not yet revealed to Avraham Avinu. So the question is why? What's unique about the carbon mincha, about the sacrifice of flour, that for some reason is a very important part of the service of the Beis HaMikdash, but for some reason was left out in this vision, in this commandment to Avraham Avinu? That's number 2. Number 3. The winter's here. The night. It's getting a little cold outside. The nights are getting a little longer. We just entered the month of Cheshvan. Jewish people call the month of Cheshvan by the name Mar Cheshvan. Why is it called Mar Cheshvan, bitter? Why was the word Mar mean? So the truth is, if you think about it, because Cheshvan seems to be a very boring month. Nothing really happens with Cheshvan. Every single other month of the Jewish year, something happens. Positive, negative, something. There's an event. Whether it be a holiday, whether it be a fast day, there's something. Cheshvan is the one month that really, there's nothing. There's nothing. So Chazal say, however, the following thing. Chazal say that even though, despite the fact that right now, there seems to be nothing special about the month of Cheshvan. However, Chazal say that when Mashiach comes and the 3rd Beis HaMikdash will be rebuilt, the dedication of the 3rd Beis HaMikdash will take place in Cheshvan. The dedication of the 3rd Beis HaMikdash will take place in Cheshvan.
Tonight we're learning in the schus of Meir Matisyahu ben Fredel for Refuah Shlema.
So the question is, what is special about Cheshbon that specifically Cheshbon, as seemingly insignificant as it is in our times, will be so important when Mashiach comes? Okay. So to explain all this, hopefully we'll get to explain all this, we have to learn a teaching of Rabbi Nachman. This is one of the more difficult teachings of Rabbi Nachman happens to be. It's in Siman Mem Tes, Parak Mem Tes, in the Likutei Moharan. Now this teaching was written very cryptically in the Likutei Moharan, and the tradition has it that he wrote this as somehow a kapara, some sort of tikkun, to protect the Jewish people from some decree that was taking place at the time. He talks about the following thing. He quotes a teaching from the Arizal. Now this teaching the Arizal, like anything from the Arizal, it's way, way above and beyond our heads, but just a little bit of the words of the Arizal, and then to bring it to Avodas Hashem, to our lives. The Arizal taught the following thing. The Arizal said the following thing. When Hashem decided to create the world, before the world was created, the light of Hashem was infinite, was blaring and infinite. It penetrated and covered all reality. And there was no room. There was no room for reality to exist. There was no room for there to be a world. It would be too overwhelmed by the light of Hashem, said the Arizal. The Nasa Chal Apani. Therefore, Kiviyachal, whatever this means, Hashem had to conceal His light, so to speak, to make room for the universe. He had to conceal His light to make room for the universe. And that empty space, Kiviyachal, so to speak, not really empty because Hashem's everywhere, but Hashem hiding His presence for there to be what seemed to be an empty space. It's in that empty space that the world is built. Why did Hashem make this? Why did Hashem do this? Because, as we know, the purpose of creation is what? Is because because Hashem wanted His malchus, His oneness to be revealed, dafka down here in this world. So in order to make a world, Hashem had no choice, kiviyachal again, as if to say, Hashem had to hide His presence to make room for there to be a place to build a world. Otherwise, His light would be too overwhelming, too overpowering. We wouldn't be able to exist if Hashem really shone His light. Hashem had to conceal His light to make an empty space, and in that empty space He builds a world. That's what the Arizal taught. All of the writings of the Arizal are to explain that. That's what all Kisser Arizal is about. Now what does that mean on the deeper? We have no idea. But Rabbi Nachman taught the following thing. That the same process, understand this, the same process that Hashem went through to create a world, which means that first His light was overwhelmingly brilliant, and Hashem had to hide His light to create what seemed to be an empty space to build a world in. That same process, says Rabbi Nachman, exists and has to, and every single neshama, every single Jew goes through that same process in order to build himself. What does that mean? So he writes the following thing. We know that every single Jew is neshama, every single Jewish neshama is a piece of God. It's a chelak elokami mal mamish. It's literally a piece of God. The ikar halakus balev, and therefore deep down in the Jewish heart, that presence of Hashem is mamish there. It's mamish there. V'halakus shebalev isha Yisraeli, and therefore, in the natural way, the way it's naturally set up is that the neshama of a Jew is so godly and it's so powerful. He bechinas ein soif. That the truth is, the light of every single one of our neshamas is so brilliant and so overwhelming that it should encompass everything. Every single one of our neshamas should be Ein Sof, should be as infinite as the light of Hashem was before He created the world. Ki ar lehav yusahu Ein Sof. What does that mean? It means that, said Rabbi Nachman, the natural way of a Jew, the natural instincts of a Jew should be, without Hashem stepping in, as we'll see, without any interference, the way of a Jew is that the light of our neshamas should be so brilliant, should be so overwhelming, that we wouldn't be able to get up in the morning. There's a story that Rabbi Zusha from Manipur was one of the great Hasidic masters. He one time was late to the shir of his Rebbe, the Maggid of Mezrich. So they asked him, "Why are you late?" So he said, "Because I woke up in the morning and I was in bed and I said Moida Ani." And I started saying the words Moida Ani L'Fnecha, and I thought about what I was saying. Moida Ani, I am thankful to you, God, Melech HaOlam, Master of the Universe. And I started to really think about this. And I thought about, what am I? Moida Ani. And I thought about, what does it mean to be Melech HaOlam, King of the Universe? And saying these words, I was so overcome with a sense of nothingness, and a sense of humility, a sense of subservience to this King of the Universe, I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't get out of bed. So I had to wait till that feeling passed, and by that time, it was already late. That's what Rizusha said. So Rabbi Nachman, every single Jew naturally should feel that way. The light of our neshamas is so overwhelming, so powerful, because it's a piece of Hashem, that the light of our neshamas is Ein Sof. It's so infinite that it should be overwhelming to all of our senses, and we should be frozen because of its brilliance. Says Rabbi Nachman. Ufi goydel ha'eslavas halev shalisha Yisraeli, because of the natural brilliance of the light of our own neshama, shu'ad ein sof, which is infinite, it would be impossible for us to do anything, even a mitzvah, to do anything. We'd be like Reb Zusha, just hovering under the cover, under the covers, just afraid of moving because of Melech HaOlam, because of the King of the Universe. We would be unable to bring out of ourselves any positive trait. Because of the great passion and brilliance of our own neshamas, we'd be mamish paralyzed. And that's what it means. In the beginning, just like before Hashem created the world, His light was overwhelming, and there was no room for there to be a world. It's the same thing with every single Jew. Naturally, the way it was normally, without Hashem interfering, the light of our neshama would be so overwhelmingly brilliant, we would be paralyzed. There wouldn't be a place for us. There wouldn't be a place for our own personality. There wouldn't be a place for our own avodah. So what does Hashem do? So Hashem, just like in the creation of the world, the process of creation, what did Hashem do? Hashem had to hide His own light in order to create what seemed to be an empty space, to allow reality to exist. So too said Rabbi Nachman, that's exactly what Hashem does with each and every one of us. He hides our own neshama from ourselves in order to create what seems to be an empty space, in order for us to fill it with good deeds. In order for us to fill it with avodas Hashem. That's what Rabbi Nachman writes. He says, therefore it must be. Therefore a person has no choice but to conceal, but to restrain his own overwhelming hislavas, his overwhelming passion for Hashem, which is infinite, in order that he should be able to serve Hashem properly in a normal, healthy way. That's what Rabbi Nachman writes. Because Hashem wants human service. Hashem wants us to work, wants us to serve Him. Hashem wants us to do mitzvahs. Hashem wants us to do kind deeds. And if we don't hide and conceal and constrain our natural passion, we wouldn't be able to do anything. That's what Rabbi Nachman writes. So let's understand this. Ad kan. That's what Rabbi Nachman writes. Let's understand this in a meaningful way for us ourselves personally. Every single one of us, at some point in time, whenever a person comes in contact, and whenever a person feels an inspiration to do tshuva, whenever a person feels an inspiration to become better, to do something, to grow, right away, a person could become very overwhelmed with that. It could be very overwhelmed. The feeling of inadequacy, when a person comes to Eretz Yisrael for the first time, you see the kotel for the first time, you realize what it means to be a Jew for the first time, you see a real Jew for the first time. It can be very overwhelming. It can be very overwhelming. At that moment, your neshama is being unleashed. Your neshama is being unleashed, and the light of your neshama is at Ein Sof, is of infinite power, and it makes you frozen. It makes you frozen. Now this doesn't necessarily happen like step one, step two. It could all happen at once. What happens then? Hashem must, and you must, restrain that passion. You must restrain that passion. There has to be the creation of an empty space. Now when this takes place, that could be very, very troublesome. It's at that point of where the light of the neshama is now being restrained and being held back, that could be very difficult for a person to handle. In practical terms, every single one of us has experienced this. You have moments of inspiration. You could have a day of inspiration, a week, a month. You could have a whole year of inspiration. And what happens? Immediately thereafter, you feel mamish empty. Mamish empty. And you think you're going through mamish yerida. You think that, I used to be a Jew. I used to be someone good. And now I feel nothing. I used to wake up for davening 3 times a day. Once a day, and stay up for 2 times a day. Now I can barely get out of bed. I used to put on tefillin with meaning, with kavanah. I used to keep Shabbos with kavanah. I used to learn. I used to daven properly. And now I don't feel anything. So the person beats himself up. A person looks at himself as a piece of dirt. Looks at himself as worthless, and as a shell of what he used to be. But Rabbi Nachman is telling us you're making a big mistake. Not only are you not slipping from where you were, not only are you not having your yerida right now, but this is part of the process of creating yourself. if the neshama was left to its own natural instincts of this overwhelming passion, then that's not the purpose. Just like in the beginning, before Hashem created the world, the light of Hashem being being Ad Ein Sof, being of infinite greatness, that's not the purpose. Hashem needs there to be a world. Hashem wants there to be a world. Hashem wants each one of us to grow and to develop our own personal talents. How does that happen? That happens dafka by taking away the brilliance of our neshamas, by creating an empty space. That empty space is very difficult sometimes to handle, to feel, because it feels empty. It feels empty. But that's the tachlis, that's the purpose, because it's now in that empty space, you have to now build. And the process of building could feel very passionless. It could feel very emotionless. It could feel very not spiritual. It could be very physical. But that's exactly what Hashem wants. That's exactly what Hashem wants. Rabbi Nachman goes on further to say that once that takes place, once a person builds within that empty space in his own heart, he builds proper vessels, he builds midas tovas, he does good deeds, even if he doesn't feel anything. He performs good deeds, he looks at people the right way, he says nice things, he learns, he davens, despite the fact that he feels empty. Says Rabbi Nachman, once you build the vessels, then the light of Hashem that original infinite light that would have paralyzed you, now has a place to come in a healthy way. And that light can now re-enter your life and fill it to the point of where you could have that infinite light of Hashem, but now you could handle it. Said Rabbi Nachman, the difference is that in the beginning, before you built those vessels, and before you built a world within that empty space, that light of Hashem would have paralyzed you. But said Rabbi Nachman, once a person goes through that empty darkness, and you fill that empty darkness with actual physical acts of mitzvahs, and physical good and good characteristic traits, and a good outlook on life, then in that empty space that you now filled with potential, now Hashem could bring back His light, and it could be unbelievably beautiful. Unbelievably beautiful. This is what it means to be a Jew. This is what it means to be a Jew. The tachlis of the Bria, the tachlis of creation was not to just have this overwhelming, paralyzing spirituality. And the tachlis of the Bria was not to have just emptiness. The tachlis was to have an empty space and to fill that with physical vessels to receive that unbelievable light of Hashem. Before Avraham Avinu came to this world, the way the world was not able to deal with this paradox. They were unable to deal with this empty space that they found themselves in. So the world took two paths. Some people took the path of feeling completely empty, completely disconnected from anything. They fell in that vacuum, in the empty space that Hashem created inside their own hearts. They were unable to fill it with anything good, and they went completely off. That's the generation of the flood, the generation of the haflag of the dispersion, the generation of Enosh of the Zara. Their problem was that when their overwhelming spirituality of their neshama, when it was taken away, when it was hidden, when Hashem created for them in their personal lives an empty space for them to fill with meaning, they were unable to live up to the task. And they fell desperately and difficultly in that empty space, further and further and further down. Other people of those generations also had a very difficult time dealing with that empty space. But instead of trying to fill that empty space, dealing with smallness, dealing with feelings of nothing, feelings of emptiness, trying to fill it with practical, physical good deeds, instead of that they tried to hide themselves from that reality and tried to escape back into that world of the infinite light of Hashem. And those were the tzaddikim like Noach, those were the tzaddikim like Chanoch, like Musa Shalach, that we don't find them making an imprint in reality. We don't find them making a revolution in the world. They lived on their own, separate from all of life, trying to recapture that brilliance of Hashem that existed before the creation, before that empty space was formed. And therefore the pasuk says about Chanoch ve'inenu, that he was taken. It doesn't even say he died. It's as if he didn't even exist. He didn't make an imprint in the world. He didn't change the world because he refused to accept the reality of this empty space. He couldn't handle it. There was one person, the first person, who not only accepted the reality of the empty space of in his heart and the empty space of all reality. Not only did he accept it, but he accepted upon his shoulders to fill it with meaning, not to turn to the other, not to pretend it's not there, not to pretend it's not there like Chanoch did, but to fill it with physical acts of kindness, with physical mitzvahs, with accomplishments of this world. That first person to do that was Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu. The first time we're introduced to Avraham Avinu, we're introduced to someone who's told Lech Lecha, go, move, do, accomplish, conquer. Hashem never said it to Noach. Hashem said to Noach, hide in your teva while the rest of the world is burning. While the empty space of the rest of the world becomes mamish sucked up into nothingness. That's what Hashem told Noach. Your whole life you wanted to return to that place of just sitting under the covers, of being overwhelmed by everything. I'm telling you, that's what, okay, so do that in the teva. That's not Avram Avinu. That's not Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu means the job of a Jew. The first Jew means the recognition that the tachlis is not to return to that place of overwhelming brilliance of light. No, it's to take the makom ponu, the empty space of the world and of his own neshama, and to fill it with kalim, with vessels. And once you do that, Hashem will bring back that light in a healthy, natural way. Rabbi Nachman goes on to say in this Torah that what? He goes on to talk about that when a person does this, when a person builds the kalim in a proper, healthy way, then the light of Hashem that comes back you're now then able to go back to that original light of Hashem, but now you're able to handle it. It doesn't stop you. It doesn't paralyze you. It now pushes you even further. When Avram Avinu chose this path of accomplishing, of doing, of being productive in this world, then Hashem, the result of that is not, maybe initially you feel very not spiritual at all, very, very practical, very physical, but ultimately the gift of that Hashem will give that person is the harmonization of and the filling of that original light of Hashem into this empty space. And instead of it going back to nothingness, it'll merge into a healthy, spiritually physical life. That's what it means. The one person that represent that this area is very, that this message is very clear of is David HaMelech. The Gemara says an amazing thing. The Gemara says that the custom of David HaMelech was that every single night at midnight he would get up from his bed and start his day at midnight. He would daven and say Tehillim, write Tehillim, learn. That's what his avodas Hashem started from midnight. Ask the Gemara in Brachas, how did he know what time midnight was? It's not like he had an alarm clock. How did he get up from bed exactly midnight? Says the Gemara. It's an unbelievable Gemara. The Gemara says in Brachas, Kinor hayitoli lamala miroishai. David HaMelech on his bed, by the top of his bed, he hung a harp. And the Gemara says every single point of midnight, when the clock struck 12 exactly, a ruach tzefaini, a northern wind blew into his room, and went through the harp, and the harp played music because of the wind, and that was David HaMelech's alarm clock. That's what the Gemara says. Okay, you pass by that Gemara. Okay, fine, very nice. It's very ingenious. But what does that mean? Understand. The Svarim tell us that the side of north, there's different directions, north, south, east, west. The ruach tzafan, the side of north, a northern wind, says the Zohar Kadosh, that embodies the concept of din. What does din mean? Din means judgment. Din means emptiness. Din means restraint. Din means an empty space. Says the Gemara, an unbelievable thing. How did David HaMelech know how to get up? When did David HaMelech's avodah start? What was David HaMelech all about? When that ruach tzefani, when that northern wind, which means restraint, which means an empty space, when it passed through his window, it made a beautiful music from his heart. Which means that what David HaMelech was the same as Avram Avinu. He saw that empty space, he saw that northern wind, and it didn't paralyze him. The opposite. He filled it with meaning. He filled it with physical mitzvahs, with good deeds, with productivity. And you know what happens when a person does that? When a person fills the empty space with vessels? Now the light of Hashem is able to come and re-enter his life, and it becomes the most beautiful song. The most beautiful song. That's what music means. Music means the ability of taking words, taking things of this world and infusing it with unbelievable desire, unbelievable passion, unbelievable ritzinus, unbelievable desire for Hashem. So the songs of David HaMelech, which means that the Arab Zusha under the covers, that overwhelming, brilliant light of Hashem, David HaMelech was able to handle it and to absorb it in a healthy way because he was always connected to the Ruach Tzefani, to that northern wind of doing practical things in that empty space. And once a person does that, then that mamish creates music. The light of Hashem is able to re-enter his life in an unbelievable way and bring out all the emotions that he always wanted. But now, instead of paralyzing him, it gets him out of bed. It gets him out of bed. Instead of Rav Zusha hearing that music and being stuck under the covers, David HaMelech hearing that music, but the music that came through the northern wind, it gets him out of bed to start his day. That's the difference. That's the difference. This is what it means to be a Jew. Understand this. This is mamish the beginning. That's why Avram Avinu, think about it. Avram Avinu and Sarah, their names began